Assalamu alaikum class. This is your teacher, lecturer Asif here. I hope you people are enjoying yourselves. A very warm welcome. Today we will be having our third lesson on our writing skill and we will be discussing phrases in clauses today. But before moving towards phrases in clauses, let us reacquaint ourselves with the very basics of English language. As we know that English alphabet comprises 26 letters as is shown on your screen, and these 26 letters combine in different patterns to make words. For example, car, cat, can, cap, etc. And these 26 letters, after combining in different patterns, make more than 171,000 words. And then these more than 171,000 words in turn combine in different patterns to make phrases and clauses and sentences. Today we will be confining our discussion to phrases and clauses. Let's see what do we mean by phrases and clauses. Here we have a few sentences. They are playing in the ground. The sun rises in the east. The bird sat on the wall, and so on. If we if we pick this part of the sentence written in red and we place it out of the sentence, if we write it separately, then it will not be conveying full sense. If we only say in the ground, or if we only say in the east, if we only say on the wall, in the morning, or across the road, these chunks of words, these groups of words, they do not convey complete sense on their own. They cannot stand on their own. They do not give full meaning on their own. So such a group of words which cannot stand on its own, which cannot convey full meaning on its own, which cannot convey full meaning independently, such a group of words is called a phrase. So in the ground, in the east, on the wall, in the morning, across the road, all these five chunks of words are phrases because they do not give complete sense, they do not give complete meaning independently. When we say independently, we mean that when we place it out of the sentence, when we place it separately out of the sentence, then they do not convey complete meaning. But on the other hand, if we say that they are playing and we place a full stop after playing, or if we place a full stop after rises, the sun rises, the bird sat, or I read paper, these groups of words, they convey full sense. We fully understand when someone says that they are playing. So such a group of words which can stand on their own, which convey full meaning independently, such a group of words is called a clause. If we further dig into it, we will see that a clause contains a subject and a predicate in it. They are playing. They is a subject and are playing is a predicate. So a clause contains a subject and a predicate in it. while on the other hand, a phrase does not contain a subject or a predicate in it. So there are two differences between a phrase and a clause. First, a phrase cannot exist independently, whereas a clause can. Secondly, a phrase does not contain a subject and a predicate in it, while a clause does contain a subject and a predicate in it. Here are the proper definitions of a phrase and a clause. A phrase is a group of words which does not convey complete sense on its own. It cannot exist independently. It cannot stand on its own. It does not contain a subject and a predicate. On the other hand, a clause is a group of words which may convey complete sense on its own. It can exist independently. It can stand on its own. It does contain a subject and a predicate in it. Let us talk about a bit further about clauses. Here we have a sentence. After I stopped drinking coffee, I began sleeping better at night. This is a sentence and it contains two clauses in it. After I stopped drinking coffee is a one clause, and I began sleeping better at night. This is another clause. But if we focus our attention on the first clause, after I stopped drinking coffee, if we take it out of this sentence, it will not be conveying full sense. If a speaker says, after I stopped drinking coffee, we will wait that the speaker might give some other information in this very sentence, that what happened when he stopped drinking coffee. So this clause, after I stopped drinking coffee, it cannot stand on its own. Now we are talking about clausing. We are talking about clauses. That there are clauses which cannot stand on their own, which uh, does not convey complete sense on their own. As here we are having an example, after I stopped drinking coffee. It does not convey complete sense, complete meaning on its own. When a speaker says that after I stopped drinking coffee, we expect him to give us some further information in this very sentence to find out what happened after the writer stopped drinking coffee. So this clause, after I stopped drinking coffee, it cannot stand on its own. It does not convey complete sense. It does not convey complete meaning. So we call it a dependent clause. Why are we calling it a dependent clause? Because it cannot stand on its own. It cannot convey complete sense on its own. It depends on another clause to convey complete sense. We cannot understand it completely unless we have this other clause, I began sleeping better at night. So after I stopped drinking coffee, this is a dependent clause. A dependent clause is also called a subordinate clause, or it is also called an incomplete sentence. A subordinate clause or a dependent clause is also called an incomplete sentence. And the same goes for this next sentence. Before I begin college, I want to brush up on my English skills. So if we stop at, if we pick this chunk before I begin college out of this context, out of this sentence, and we let it write somewhere separately, once again, it will not be conveying complete sense. It will be a dependent clause. It is a subordinate clause, or we can say that it is an incomplete sentence. So after having discussed about dependent clauses or the main clauses, phrases, let us now move ahead. We will now learn how can we recognize a phrase and a sentence. We will be doing an activity subject and predicate test, and by using this activity we will learn to differentiate between a phrase and a clause. Here we have a few phrases and sentences jumbled together, and we will be separating them. Here we have here are the titles of a few books. These are the titles of a few books. Some of the titles are sentences and some of the titles are phrases, and we will separate them using this activity subject and predicate tests. But let us revise, let us reacquaint ourselves by these two terms, subject and a predicate. Subject is simply what or who is being talked about. As for example, in this sentence, students are learning chemistry. Now, who is being talked about? Students are being talked about, so students are the subject. And what is predicate? Predicate is what is being said about subject. So what are being said about students? It is said that they are learning chemistry. So our learning chemistry is a predicate. So we will now be applying this subject and predicate test on these titles. Let's apply it on the very first title of a book, Lord of Chaos. And first test, what is being talked about? Lord of Chaos. So it passes the first test. Let's apply on it the second test. What is being said about Lord of Chaos? No answer. We do not have any answer for this question. So it does not pass the second test. So this title, Lord of Chaos, is not a sentence. If a title passes both these tests, subject and predicate tests, only then it will be a sentence. Otherwise, it will be a phrase. So, Lord of Chaos, it does not pass the second test. What is the second test? The second test, what is being said about the subject? What is being said about Lord of Chaos? And we do not have any answer for this. So, it does not pass this second test. For a title to be a sentence, it must pass both these tests, subject and predicate test. But here, this title, Lord of Chaos, it does not pass the second test, so it is not a sentence, it is a phrase. Let us take another title. This is the title, we want everything. This is the title of another book. So let's apply our first test on it. What is being talked about? We have the answer, we, right? And then it means that it passes the first test. Let's see what happens in the second test. What is being said about we? They want everything. Want everything is said about we, said about the subject. So this title, it passes the second test also. So it is a sentence then, and it is not a phrase. So by applying this test, subject in predicate test, we can easily differentiate between phrases and sentences. We can recognize a title to be a phrase or a sentence. Now we will move to our next step. Here we will be learning. Here we will be differentiating between incomplete sentences and complete sentences. We must know that incomplete sentences are also called dependent clauses or subordinate clauses. So we will be learning to differentiate between subordinate clauses or dependent clauses or incomplete sentences and complete sentences. We will be using the same activity of subject and predicate tests. Here we have a few more titles of the books, and these titles, some of the titles are incomplete sentences and some of them are complete sentences. So we will be applying subject and predicate tests on these titles, and we will see whether a title is a complete sentence or it is a dependent clause or it is an incomplete sentence. So let's see, let's apply this test here. We have a title. The more important things are often ignored. This is a title of a book. Let's apply our first test on it. First test is what is being talked about, the more important things. It passes first test. Second test, what is said about the more important things, I mean subject. They are often ignored. What is said about the subjects? They are often ignored. More important things are often ignored. It passes second test also, and we are left with no any extra word. When we are not left with any extra word after application of this test, then it means that the title under discussion is a complete sentence. It is not a dependent clause, or it is not an incomplete sentence, or it is not a subordinate clause. When we apply this subject in predicate test on a title or on a statement, and we are left with no any extra word, it means that the title or the statement under consideration is a complete sentence, and it is not an incomplete sentence. It is not a dependent clause. It is not a subordinate clause. Let's apply this test on another title. Here we have the title of a book, Why I Write. So let's apply first test on it. What is being talked about? We have the answer, I. It passes first test. Let's apply the second test. What is being said about I? Write. I write. It passes second test also, but we are left with an extra word, why. So this title, Why I Write, is not a sentence, is not a complete sentence. It is an incomplete sentence, or we can say a dependent clause, or we can say a subordinate clause. It is not a complete sentence. We will apply this test on another title. We have the title, When the Road Ends. First test, what is being talked about? The road. So it passes first test. Second test, what is being said about the road? The road ends. Right? It passes the second test, but again, we are left with an extra word, when. So this is not a complete sentence. This is an incomplete sentence, or this is a dependent clause. This is a subordinate clause. Whenever we apply this subject in predicate test on a statement and we are left with an extra word, then that statement or that title will not be a complete sentence. It will be an incomplete sentence. It will be a dependent clause, or it will be a subordinate clause. So when the road ends, this is a dependent clause. This is an incomplete sentence. This is a subordinate clause. This is not a complete sentence. Now here we will see next that how can we convert an incomplete sentence or a dependent clause or a subordinate clause into a complete sentence. This is very easy. We will be learning to convert an incomplete sentence or a dependent clause or a subordinate clause into a complete sentence. Let's see. We will be using an activity called addition subtraction. Addition and subtraction. There are two ways to turn an incomplete sentence into a complete sentence, and the activity we will be using is known as addition subtraction. In addition, we simply add a main clause or an independent clause to the incomplete sentence, a dependent clause, and it becomes a complete sentence. Let's apply this activity on an incomplete sentence. We have an incomplete sentence, or we have a dependent clause because they are fond of music. Now we can add any main clause to make it a complete sentence. Here I have given three choices to you people. You may pick any of these three main clauses, these complete sentences, to complete this incomplete sentence because they're fond of music. We can say that people are enjoying the party because they are fond of music. There might be a very melodious music in the party. So we can complete this above incomplete sentence clause by combining this main clause with it. People are enjoying the party because they are fond of music, and we will place a full stop after music. Right? And then we have another main clause. The school is arranging for a concert because they are fond of music. We can say like this. And students have requested to the principal for a concert because they are fond of music. Because they means the student, right? Students have requested to the principal for a concert because they are fond of music. So we have added this complete sentence or main clause or independent clause. Students have requested to the principal for a concert to make the above incomplete sentence a complete one. Right? We can we can complete these incomplete sentences by another activity, and we call it subtraction. And in subtraction, this is so simple. In subtraction, we simply remove the extra word from the incomplete sentence, from the dependent clause, or from the subordinate clause. By the extra word, we mean conjunctions, as we see here, because they are fond of music. If we remove because in the beginning, we have a complete sentence, they are fond of music. So this is another way by which we can complete incomplete sentences by which we can convert a dependent clause into an independent clause, right? We have simply removed the extra word. By the extra word, we mean conjunction from the beginning of the word. We have removed because, and now the sentence is they are fond of music. It conveys complete sense, and it is a complete sentence. Let's, apply it on another sentence. If people go to China for business, we will try to complete it by addition first. We have three options here. The Chinese are very friendly. The Chinese are very friendly. It can help our country. The Chinese always welcome them. I think that we should choose one of these complete sentences to complete the incomplete sentence here. And the best choice would be the last one. The Chinese always welcome them if people go to China for business. By adding this complete sentence, the Chinese always welcome them, we have completed the incomplete sentence which we were given here in the beginning of this slide. If people go to China for business. So we have completed this incomplete sentence. We have completed this dependent clause, this subordinate clause into a complete sentence by adding a main clause to it. This sentence can also be converted, this clause can also be, this dependent clause, this incomplete sentence, or this subordinate clause can also be converted into a complete sentence by the activity of subtraction. We will have to just remove the extra word, the conjunction, which here it is if. If we remove if, we will have a complete sentence. People go to China for business. This conveys a complete sense. So this is a complete sentence. That's all now for today. You people have been provided with a practice document. The document comprises 20 dependent clauses, or we can say incomplete sentences, or we can say subordinate clauses, and you have to complete it using addition subtraction activity. Thank you so very much. See you in the class.